stories to be told, treasures to be found, silver and gold, dollars and pounds, never worth more than the stories of a town.
Boats have been coming and going from this harbour here in Newcastle since 1797. Those early sailing vessels would negotiate their way out the mouth of the river, turn south to supply the struggling settlement at Sydney. The captain and the crew of one particular vessel, the Hunter, probably didn't realise quite how significant their journey was to be. Once they got out to sea, they turned north and headed for Bengal, now called Bangladesh. On board was Australia's first cargo for export, 50 tonnes of coal. And so began a long tradition of digging stuff out of the ground and flogging it overseas. A lieutenant from Sydney by the name of John Shortland was the first person to notice the value of the Newcastle area. He was pursuing escaped convicts from the Sydney settlement when he happened upon this river and saw that large coal deposits were clearly visible. As was the case back then, if you discovered something significant, you named it after the governor of the day. This magnificent stretch of water became the Hunter River. Coal mining quickly became one of the settlement's central operations, an activity that was to become pivotal to the success of the region. This map has only just been discovered. It's been buried in the Public Records Office in London for over 200 years. And what it reveals is what I believe to be the first coal mine in the Southern Hemisphere, right here at Collier's Point. To mine coal, you needed miners, and the only workforce we had back then were convicts. All the mining took place under the headland behind me here. The convicts would load the coal into baskets on their shoulders and wade waist deep into the Hunter River to haul the coal up onto the waiting sailing ships. Newcastle became the major prison in New South Wales, with a workforce of over 1,000 convicts. The settlement quickly began to take shape with this surplus of labour. A breakwater was built to assist ships into the treacherous harbour. The commanding officer at the time, Major Morissette, wanted a bath. So he got one built. Right here, they call it the bogey hole. By the 1850s, free settlers had changed the fabric of the town. With coal exports and subsidiary businesses, the industrial base of Newcastle was established. However, one decision was going to change Newcastle's industrial landscape in a most dramatic way. This was a city-changing event. Within the space of only 6 years, industrial workers suddenly outnumbered the coal miners 4 to 1. And it wasn't long before the BHP Steelworks became the biggest in the British Empire. This is the Newcastle Club, an institution at the top end of town. From here, the captains of industry would look out upon a sea of activity. Tall ships, trains, the steelworks, and bustling warehouses. Now, one of those captains was a bloke called Essington Lewis. In 1926, he was made Managing Director of BHP. In 1934, he was on an exploratory tour of the world. He also visited Japan and Germany. He came back to Australia, troubled by what he saw in these countries. He thought that war was inevitable,
and he wanted BHP and Australia to be prepared. His prediction of war sadly proved right, and when war finally came, Essington had made sure that BHP was in a position to make steel more cheaply than any other country in the world because he controlled the mines, the ships, and the factories.
When Japan did enter the war, submarines began torpedoing bulk coal carriers off the coast. But on this night, their strategy changed. And Australia was reminded of just how important Newcastle was. One of the targets was the steelworks, and a total of 34 shells rained down upon Newcastle.
One of the shells landed and exploded right here, and this little group of terraces on Parnell Place were badly damaged. Miraculously, the only reported injury from that night was a young bombardier called Stan Newton, who, when he heard the guns going off, made his way up to Fort Scratchley, and a piece of shrapnel caught him in the head. With blood pouring down his face, he managed to get up there to man his station. The response needed to be quick. First shell loaded. Finding range, it falls short. Second shell loaded. You got to remember, it's night time. The only way the 7-man gun crew can find range is by the flashes from the guns on the submarine. Fire, it's long. And just as the gun crew find range, the submarine dips below the surface of the water. The action by the gunners that night remains etched in Australian military history. They were the only shots fired from the Australian mainland at an enemy vessel.
"47 years later, Newcastle's foundations were again rocked, this time by natural causes.
An air of uncertainty had come across the radio from the control centre that they believed that there'd been some kind of incident, possibly an earthquake with some buildings collapsed or possibly some form of explosion. But we were directed by our ambulance control directly to the Newcastle Workers Club.
So mate, what was your initial impression? What did you see?
Absolute panic and bedlam.
Yeah, really?
Yep. We pulled up here facing the other direction. There were people coming out of the club, and as we were going in, people were stumbling out. There was police officers, firemen, ambulance officers, bystanders attempting to help. And it was just a matter of working with some teams from all the services, getting into the club and just finding an area to work from.
13 people died that day, 9 at the Workers' Club. 160 people were injured, and over 10,000 buildings were damaged. Australia's most destructive earthquake had taken a severe toll on the town.
The thing special about Newcastle is our community. The strong spirit, the pride, the commitment. Newcastle people don't take things lightly. They work hard and pull together. If you look at what was done, how the people were supported, it really shows a true commitment from our Newcastle community.
In another testament to the resilience of this community, the closing of the BHP Steelworks, which had been such a key part of the fabric of the city for so long, was to have a much smaller impact than first thought.
And even in these times of dramatic change, Newcastle retains that special character that makes it an Australian icon.